Picture this. It is a warm Saturday evening in the Bahamas, the kind of evening that postcards are made of. The sun is dropping behind the turquoise water, painting everything gold and amber. Palm trees are swaying. Somewhere in the distance, a steel drum band is playing. And a couple, married for over 2 decades, is climbing into a small boat after a long day of drinking and laughing on the beach.
They have been living this life for 4 years. No mortgage, no commute, no alarm clocks, just the ocean, the horizon, and each other. Their home is a 46-foot sailboat named Soulmate. Their social media handle is the Sailing Hookers, a cheeky nod to their last name. And if you scroll through their posts, what you see looks like everything most people dream about and never get.
Except one of them is about to vanish.
And the other one is not going to call for help for 8 hours.
This is the story of Lynette Hooker, a 55-year-old mother from Michigan who traded everything she had, her house, her furniture, her retirement savings, her life on land, for a dream of sailing the Caribbean with the man she loved. A woman whose last Instagram caption read, quote, "Not going anywhere for a while," end quote. She posted that 2 days before she disappeared from the face of the earth.
Tonight, we are going to go through every piece of this case. The official story, the holes in it, the forensic technology on that boat that investigators believe could tell them everything, the mystery sailboat that was anchored right next to theirs the night she vanished, the Coast Guard operation that seized their yacht in open water just days ago, and the financial picture that raises questions nobody in the family wants to answer, but everyone is thinking about.
If you have been following this case, buckle in, because things have moved fast. And if this is the first time you are hearing about Lynette Hooker, I promise you, by the end of this, you will not forget her name.
Let me start at the beginning because I think it matters to understand who Lynette Hooker was before she became a headline.
Lynette was 55 years old. She was a mother. She was originally from Michigan. She had spent decades working for AT&T, building a career, raising her daughter Karli, paying into her retirement. By all accounts from the people who knew her, Lynette was someone who played it safe for most of her life. She did the responsible thing. She worked hard. She saved her money, and somewhere along the way, she fell in love with the ocean.
She married Brian Hooker when she was in her early 30s. He was a few years older, 58 at the time of her disappearance. Brian was a former Marine, which matters later and we will explain why. They had been together for roughly 25 years. And about 4 years before Lynette disappeared, the two of them made a decision that would change everything. They sold it all. The house, the furniture, the cars, everything that tied them to dry land.
Lynette cashed in a significant portion of her retirement savings. We are talking about upwards of $650,000 in her 401k alone. And they bought a sailboat.
Not just any sailboat, a 46-foot Morgan sailing sloop. A big, beautiful vessel with 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen, a master bedroom at the stern, and enough technology on board to make a NASA engineer blush. They named her Soulmate. They started a social media page called the Sailing Hookers, documenting their travels around the Caribbean, the Bahamas, the East Coast, paddleboarding in Marsh Harbor, swimming with sea turtles, cooking with solar power, sunsets that looked like paintings.
Lynette called the ocean her happy place. And if you watch those videos, the two of them laughing on the bow of that boat, her hair blowing in the wind, him adjusting the sails, it looks like a love story set against an endless horizon.
But there were cracks. And this is where the story starts to get complicated.
Lynette's daughter, Karli Aylesworth, who is 28 years old, has spoken publicly about what life was really like behind those social media posts. Karli told multiple news outlets that her mother had left Brian before. multiple times. That Lynette had gone back to Florida to stay with family, telling people that things had gotten really bad on that boat.
And Karli alleged something that cuts right to the heart of this case. She told Fox News that there was a history of Brian choking her mother out and threatening to throw her overboard.
Let me say that again. Threatening to throw her overboard. And now, here we are.
Now, Brian's attorneys have categorically denied those allegations. And in fairness, court records from 2015 show a complicated picture. There was a domestic dispute that year. Lynette told police she had been struck in the forehead by Brian. She herself was arrested on assault charges. A prosecutor reviewed the case, determined there was insufficient evidence to figure out who started it, and the whole thing was dismissed. No charges stuck on either side. So you have conflicting accounts, which is common in domestic situations, and we want to be upfront about that.
But here is the detail that keeps investigators and Karli, and honestly most people who have followed this case up at night. Lynette had a plane ticket. A ticket she booked for March 11th, 2026. A ticket to leave Brian. Again. She never used it. 3 weeks later, on April 4th, she was gone.
Now let us walk you through the night of April 4th, 2026, because this is where the official story begins. And I want you to listen carefully to every detail because we are going to come back to them one by one.
According to Brian, he and Lynette spent the day of April 4th out on their 8-foot dinghy. That is the small boat they used to get back and forth between Soulmate and shore. It is not a rubber inflatable. It is a Boss brand hard-hull dinghy, a rigid fiberglass boat, more like a miniature pontoon than what most people picture when they hear the word dinghy. Remember that.
They started at Tahiti Beach, a popular shallow water hangout on the southern tip of Elbow Cay, where there is a floating bar that serves drinks at low tide. After that, they went to the Abaco Inn near Hopetown for dinner and more drinks. By all accounts, it was a full day. Food, sun, alcohol.
Around 7:30 in the evening, they got back in the dinghy to make their way to Soulmate, which was anchored at a spot called Aunt Pat's Bay. The sun was setting. Sunset in the Bahamas on April 4th was approximately 7:40 in the evening.
And this is where Brian's account of what happened begins to diverge from what physics, logic, and forensic evidence suggest is possible.
Brian told authorities that as they were heading back, conditions turned. Winds picked up to 20-something knots. The sea got choppy. And then, in the middle of all of that, Lynette, and I want you to hear his exact words because they matter, quote, basically just bounced off the dinghy, end quote. Those are his words. He said them in a recorded phone call to a friend named Blaine Stevenson on April 7th, a call Brian did not know was being recorded. Stevenson later made the recording public.
Bounced off the dinghy from a hard hull fiberglass boat that does not bounce. People do not bounce off rigid fiberglass. That is not how physics works.
But let us keep going.
Brian says the boat's engine cut out because Lynette was wearing the safety lanyard, the kill switch cord, and when she went into the water, it pulled out and killed the engine. Now here is something important about that dinghy. Brian and Lynette had replaced the original gasoline outboard motor with an electric motor, one of those quiet battery-powered units you charge up. That is actually unusual for a dinghy that size. And the kill switch setup on an electric motor for a small boat like that is not standard practice.
But more importantly, think about what that means logistically. The kill switch is designed to shut down the engine if the driver falls overboard, so the boat does not speed off without them or drag them. But if the passenger falls overboard, the last thing you want is for the engine to die, because then you cannot circle back. You cannot motor over to them. You need power to rescue them.
So who was wearing the kill switch? According to Brian, Lynette was, which would make her the driver. And if she was driving, then Brian was the passenger. And if the passenger is the one who stays on the boat while the driver bounces off, that raises a question that nobody has answered. How does the driver get thrown from the boat while the passenger stays put?
Brian says he yelled for her. He says he threw a flotation cushion toward her. He says he could not see her because the moon had not risen yet. He says he anchored the dinghy and paddled for hours, eventually drifting 4 miles west to a boatyard in Marsh Harbor, where he arrived at 4 in the morning on April 5th.
8 hours. 8 full hours from when his wife allegedly went overboard to when he made contact with another human being. And during all of that time, he did not call 911. He did not use a radio. He did not fire a FLIR. He paddled to shore, made his way through the bush in the dark, and only then contacted police.
Now Karli found out what happened when Brian left her a voicemail. Not a phone call, a voicemail, roughly 24 hours after her mother disappeared.
Karli told CNN something that has become the defining question of this entire investigation. She said, quote, "How do you just lose my mom?" End quote.
That question haunts this case. It haunts investigators. It haunts anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes looking at the facts.
Now let us tell you what happened in the days immediately after. Because things moved fast, and there are details that get buried in the general news coverage that deserve your attention.
Lynette was reported missing on April 5th. By April 8th, just 3 days later, Brian Hooker was taken into custody by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. The Assistant Commissioner of Police told Reuters that Brian was being questioned based on, and these are his words, quote, "some probable cause we have," end quote.
Brian's attorney at the time, a Bahamian lawyer named Terrell Butler, told reporters that when Brian first went in to speak with police, he thought he was there as a witness. He believed he was helping with the search. He gave a voluntary statement. But then police asked him to come back for more questioning. He declined without his attorney present. And the third time they brought him in, it was as a suspect.
He was detained for 5 days. Under Bahamian law, police can hold someone for up to 48 hours, then petition a court for an extension of up to 96 additional hours. That extension was granted. A magistrate signed off on it. That tells you something. That tells you investigators believed they needed more time with him.
While Brian was in custody, police executed a search warrant on Soulmate. They seized electronic devices from the boat. Phones, navigation equipment, the boat's own systems. They are reviewing that evidence. We do not know everything they found. But hold on to that because we are about to talk about what is on that boat electronically, and it is going to change how you think about this entire case.
On April 13th, prosecutors recommended that no charges be filed at that time, pending further investigation. Brian was released. He walked out of the Central Police Station on Grand Bahama, and the very next day, he sat down for interviews with NBC, CBS, ABC, every major network. He said he would not stop looking for Lynette. He said no one with higher authority was going to stop him from searching. He said Lynette was his life. That they had been together almost half his life. That she was strong and determined, and he believed she could still be alive.
And then, hours after those interviews, literally hours, Brian Hooker left the Bahamas. He flew to the United States. His attorney released a statement saying his mother was gravely ill and he needed to be at her bedside. And look, we are not going to dismiss a sick mother. That is real. His attorney notified Bahamian authorities. That is confirmed.
But come on. You went on national television and told every camera in the Bahamas that you were not going to stop looking for your wife. And then you left on your own, hours later. That is a fact. Make of it what you will.
Brian is now back in Michigan, where he has retained a second attorney, a Grand Rapids-based lawyer. He remains a suspect in the Bahamian investigation, according to the Commissioner of Police. He has not been charged with anything. He maintains his innocence. And Lynette Hooker has still not been found.
Now we want to take you inside Soulmate, because this boat is not just a home. It is, forensically speaking, one of the most important pieces of evidence in this entire investigation. And the way we are able to know what is on it, beyond what investigators have disclosed, is thanks to a YouTube channel called Boat Snoop. The host of that channel tours boats that are listed for sale and does detailed walkthroughs, inside and out, for people who love the water. And before Brian and Lynette ever bought this vessel, before it was ever named Soulmate, every inch of it was toured on camera.
5 separate identifiers confirm that the boat in that footage is the same vessel. The hull identification number matches. The hull ID matches. The call sign matches. The Maritime Mobile Service Identity Number, which is basically the boat's unique digital fingerprint, matches. And there are 2 dolphin statues fixed to the bow. You can see them in the old tour footage. You can see them in recent footage of Soulmate sitting in Marsh Harbor. Same dolphins, same boat.
So now we know we are looking at the right vessel. Let us talk about what is on it.
The first thing that jumps out is the electronics, because this is not a normal sailboat. The electronics on this vessel was specifically called out as exceptional, unusual, the kind of setup that most sailboats simply do not have. And we are not just talking about a GPS and a radio. We are talking about a full suite of systems that, when you think about it from a forensic standpoint, turn this boat into something very close to a floating black box.
First, a FLIR system. FLIR stands for Forward-Looking Infrared. It is a thermal night vision camera. You can see on a screen down below in the cabin, even in pitch darkness. You can zoom in on vessels. You can see people in the water at night, even when there is no moon. Let that sink in.
Brian says the reason he could not see Lynette after she went overboard was because the moon had not risen yet. He was on a boat that has a camera system specifically designed to see in total darkness.
Second, Raymarine Autopilot. Not one system, 2, a backup system. 1 on the wheel, 1 hydraulic. This boat can essentially steer itself. It has a built-in third crew member.
Third, radar mounted at the stern.
Fourth, solar panels. And here is where it gets really significant. The solar setup on this boat was noted as being exceptionally powerful, around 600 watts. So powerful that the boat does not need to be plugged into shore power to run. It operates entirely off solar the majority of the time.
Now, why does that matter? Because on the night Lynette disappeared, Soulmate's satellite tracking signal went dark for approximately 11 hours. Then it came back.
There are a few explanations for that. Cloud cover, but that does not typically cause an 11-hour outage. A satellite malfunction, but then every boat in the area would have lost signal, not just Soulmate. A power failure, but the solar system on that boat is so robust that it would have kicked back in almost immediately.
Which leaves one explanation. The most probable one, according to multiple analysts who have looked at this. Someone manually turned the tracking system off. And then 11 hours later, turned it back on.
Now, we want to be careful. We are not saying Brian Hooker did that. He has not been charged with any crime. But that question, why did Soulmate go dark for 11 hours on the night Lynette disappeared, is a question that federal investigators are very much pursuing.
And there is more about the boat that connects to Brian's story. When the Hopetown Fire and Rescue team brought Brian back to Soulmate the morning of April 5th, after picking him up from Marsh Harbor, witnesses say he did something unusual. Before going below deck, before doing anything else, Brian went straight to the back of the boat and started fiddling around near the aft hatch. That is a small opening at the very stern that you can access from outside. Witnesses described him as mucking around back there, possibly removing an air conditioning unit.
Why? Well, Brian himself told a friend he had to break into his own boat. When you live on a boat, you lock it when you leave, just like you lock your house. The theory, and this is not confirmed, is that there was a hidden key stashed near that aft entrance, and getting to it required moving equipment out of the way.
But law enforcement was watching. And they could not understand why, after your wife has just disappeared in the ocean, the first thing you do when you get back to your boat is go straight to the stern and start removing hardware. That question has never been answered.
Let us bring up one more thing about the boat before we move on, because it is critical. Lynette herself posted on social media about Brian geeking out and networking the vessel. He was actively adding more technology to an already technologically advanced boat. This was a man who understood electronics, who deliberately kitted out his floating home with systems far beyond what most sailors use.
Those systems have records, navigation logs, GPS data, communication records, sensor data. If that boat moved the night of April 4th, there will be a record of it. If anyone communicated anything from that boat, there will be a record. If systems were manually deactivated and reactivated, there will be a record. You cannot operate a vessel like Soulmate and leave no trace. And those records are now in the hands of federal investigators. We will come back to that in a moment.
Now we want to talk about something that has not gotten nearly enough attention in the mainstream coverage of this case, and that is the money.
Lynette worked for AT&T for decades. She had accumulated upwards of $650,000 in her retirement account. She sold everything to fund this life on the water. Her house, her belongings, everything she had built on land was liquidated and poured into the shared adventure on Soulmate. Her entire financial future was tied to that boat and to the life she was living with Brian.
Brian, by contrast, according to multiple people who knew the couple, had burned through his own retirement savings. His 401k was gone. And as of the night Lynette disappeared, Soulmate, the boat, was essentially everything of value Brian had left. He did not own a home on land. He did not have a separate nest egg. That boat was it.
Now, we are not drawing conclusions from this, but investigators follow the money. They always have and they always will. And the financial picture here raises questions that are going to require answers. If Lynette had left Brian, as she apparently was planning to do for the second or third time, what would have happened to the boat? To the money she invested in it? To the life insurance? To the retirement accounts?
Those are questions that the investigation is examining right now. And when the answers come, they may reshape everything we think we know about this case.
Okay, now let us get to what has happened in the last 2 weeks, because this is where the case has exploded.
On May 5th, 2026, exactly 1 month after Lynette disappeared, the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service went public with a new plea for information. They posted on social media. They released images. And what they were asking the public to help them find was the owner of a specific sailboat. A boat that was moored at Aunt Pat's Bay, the exact same anchorage where Soulmate was sitting on the night of April 4th.
A Coast Guard memo obtained by CBS News stated, and we are paraphrasing, that the owners or occupants of that sailing vessel may have information relevant to the investigation.
Let us explain why this is significant on multiple levels.
First, the Coast Guard Investigative Service, known as CGIS, is not the Bahamian police. These are sworn federal agents of the United States government who operate under the Department of Justice. The fact that they opened a criminal investigation into this case at all, and they confirmed that publicly, is not routine. This is not a simple missing persons case being handled by local authorities. This has gone federal.
Second, the fact that they are actively seeking a witness boat 1 month into the investigation tells you they are not just reviewing Brian's story. They're not just looking at data from the yacht. They're looking for people who were physically there. People who may have seen the dinghy leave. People who may have heard something. People who may have seen the dinghy come back without Lynette.
Unpack's Bay is an anchorage. It is a place where boats cluster. It is entirely possible, and CGIS clearly believes it, that someone on that mystery sailboat was there the night of April 4th and may have witnessed something critical.
And then, a few days later, the case took another massive turn.
Around May 8th, Lynette's daughter Karli noticed something alarming through a remote monitoring system. Two men she had never seen before, neither of them Brian, boarded Soulmate in Marsh Harbor and began preparing to move it.
And then they turned off the GPS.
Karli posted a video on Mother's Day, her first Mother's Day without her mom. And in it, she said, and we are paraphrasing closely, "The boat has been moved by two men, neither of them are Brian. I have never seen them before. And they turned off their GPS so no foreign land can track them anymore." She said she believed the boat was heading for Florida. She said she had not heard anything from the Coast Guard about it.
Now think about that for a second. The boat at the center of a federal criminal investigation into a woman's disappearance is being moved by unknown individuals who deliberately disable the tracking system. That alone would set off alarm bells for any investigator.
But here is what Karli did not know at the time she posted that video. The Coast Guard already knew. They were watching. They had been watching. And they were waiting.
On May 9th, approximately 40 nautical miles off the coast of Melbourne, Florida, the United States Coast Guard executed what they officially described as a complex surveillance and interdiction operation. They boarded the sailboat Soulmate at sea and took it into federal custody.
Let us unpack that language for you because it matters. Complex surveillance and interdiction operation. That is not language you use for a routine missing persons case. That is not language you use when you think someone just fell off a boat. That is the language of a criminal investigation into something much larger. It is the kind of operation you conduct when you believe a vessel contains evidence of a crime and there is a risk that evidence could be destroyed or moved beyond your reach.
Drone images obtained by CBS News showed Soulmate docked at the Coast Guard station in Fort Pierce, Florida, wrapped in yellow police tape. The boat is being processed for potential evidence by CGIS special agents. Every electronic device, every navigation log, every sensor, every surface that could hold forensic material, all of it.
The Coast Guard confirmed publicly that the vessel is currently in their custody as part of an active criminal investigation into Lynette Hooker's disappearance.
And as of this recording, nobody has publicly identified who those two men on the boat were. Nobody has explained why they were moving Soulmate. Nobody has explained why the GPS was disabled, and nobody has explained who, if anyone, directed them to do it.
Brian Hooker is in Michigan. He was not on the boat. But someone sent those men. Someone wanted Soulmate moved. And someone did not want the boat's location tracked while it was in transit. Those are facts. And they are facts that investigators are pursuing right now.
Now, before we go back to the timeline, we want to pause and talk about something that is really important for understanding this case in its full context. And that is the social media picture versus the reality. Because this case, more than almost any other we have covered, is a case about the difference between what people show the world and what actually happens behind closed doors. Or in this case, behind the cabin walls of a sailboat in the middle of the ocean.
If you go to the Sailing Hookers pages right now, and millions of people have since this story broke, what you see is aspirational content. You see a couple living their best life. You see turquoise water and golden sunsets. You see Lynette paddleboarding with a huge smile on her face. You see Brian adjusting the rigging with the confidence of a man who knows exactly what he's doing. You see them cooking together in the galley. You see dolphins swimming alongside the hull. You see captions about freedom and adventure and choosing each other over the mundane routine on land.
And none of that is necessarily fake. Those moments probably happened. Those smiles were probably real in those moments. But what social media does not show you is the fights. It does not show you the screaming matches on a boat where there is nowhere to walk away to. It does not show you a woman packing a bag and flying to Florida because things got so bad she could not stay. It does not show you a plane ticket booked for March 11th that was never used.
Social media is a highlight reel. And in true crime cases, that highlight reel can actually do damage because it creates a narrative in the public mind that makes the truth harder to accept. People look at those videos and they think, they look so happy, they looked so in love. How could anything bad have happened between them? And the answer is the same answer it always is. You do not know what happens when the camera turns off.
Karli has been very clear about this. She has said publicly that the social media image was not the full picture, that her mother had left Brian multiple times, that the relationship was volatile, that there were incidents that never made it into a caption or a TikTok. And the court records from 2015 confirm that, at minimum, there was at least one documented domestic dispute serious enough to involve police and result in an arrest.
We bring this up not to bash anyone, but because it matters. When investigators look at a case like this, they do not look at the Instagram feed. They look at the phone records, the text messages, the emails, the financial transactions, the travel history, the police reports. They look at the reality. And the reality of Brian and Lynette Hooker's marriage appears to have been significantly more complicated than what 4 years of sailing content would suggest.
There is another dimension to this case that deserves some attention, and that is the jurisdictional complexity. Because this is not a straightforward investigation by any means from a legal standpoint.
Lynette disappeared in the territorial waters of the Bahamas. That puts primary jurisdiction with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. And they did act. They questioned Ryan. They detained him for 5 days. They executed a search warrant on Soulmate. They seized electronic devices. They conducted searches of the surrounding waters with the support of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force.
But the Bahamas is a sovereign nation, and its legal system operates differently from the American one. Bahamian authorities can only hold someone for so long without charges. They can investigate, but the resources available to a small island nation's police force are not the same as what the United States federal government can bring to bear.
Enter the Coast Guard Investigative Service. CGIS has jurisdiction because this case involves American citizens, an American-flagged vessel, and potential violations of federal law. CGIS agents are sworn federal law enforcement officers who work directly with the Department of Justice. They have access to forensic laboratories, digital forensic specialists, marine engineers, and the full weight of the federal investigative apparatus.
The fact that CGIS opened a criminal investigation, not just a review, not just an advisory role, but a full criminal investigation, signals that they believe there is evidence of a crime. You do not deploy federal agents, conduct surveillance operations, seize vessels at sea, and interview witnesses across multiple jurisdictions for an accident. That is not how the system works.
And there is a third layer here that most people do not think about. Brian Hooker is now in Michigan. If charges are ultimately filed, the question of where those charges are brought, in the Bahamas, in federal court in the United States, or potentially both, is going to be a complicated legal question. Extradition treaties, jurisdictional agreements, prosecutorial discretion, all of that comes into play. But that is a bridge to cross when we get there. For now, the investigation is active on both sides of the water.
We also want to talk about something that has been discussed in the maritime community, among people who actually sail and live on boats, because their perspective on this case is illuminating in ways that the general public might not fully appreciate.
People who live aboard sailboats, the cruising community as they call themselves, are a tight-knit group. They know each other. They look out for each other. When someone goes overboard, the response is immediate and it is communal. Other boats in the anchorage help. People fire up their engines. Spotlights come on. Radio calls go out on channel 16, which is the international distress frequency. The Coast Guard is contacted. It is all hands on deck. Literally.
What did not happen the night of April 4th is exactly that. No distress call was made on Channel 16. No other boats in the anchorage reported being contacted for help. No spotlight swept the water. Nobody in the vicinity heard anything that suggested someone was in the water and in distress.
Antipodes Bay is an anchorage. There were other boats there. The mystery sailboat that CGIS is looking for was there. And yet, the only account we have of what happened that night comes from one person, Brian Hooker. And his account was not shared with anyone until roughly 8 hours after the alleged incident, and not shared with his stepdaughter until roughly 24 hours later.
In the cruising community, that is almost unheard of. If you are on a boat and someone goes overboard, you scream for help. You use your radio. You use your phone. You signal other boats. You do everything you possibly can in those first critical minutes because you know everyone who has spent any time on the water knows that the window for survival in the ocean at night is brutally short. Hypothermia, currents, disorientation, sharks, all of it compounds every minute that passes.
The idea that an experienced sailor, a former Marine, a man who had been living on the water for 4 years, would spend an hour yelling into the darkness and then simply paddle away. That does not compute for people who live this life, and their voices have been some of the most pointed in questioning Brian's account.
Now, let us take you back to the timeline one more time, because when you lay it out the way a prosecutor would, when you hold every claim up against the physical and forensic evidence that exists, there are things that do not survive scrutiny.
Brian says they left the Abaco Inn around 7:30 in the evening. Sunset was approximately 7:40. He says Lynette went overboard shortly after departure. He says the moon had not risen, so visibility was extremely low. He says he yelled for her for about an hour. He anchored the dinghy. He drifted. He paddled 4 miles in the dark in 20-knot winds through choppy seas. And he arrived at Marsh Harbor Boatyard at 4 in the morning.
8 hours. From the moment his wife went into the water to the moment he spoke to another person. During those 8 hours, a woman who could not be seen was floating in the ocean. No search was initiated. No Coast Guard was notified. No radio call was made. No FLIR was fired.
Brian drew a map. He took a screenshot of his route from Navionics, a GPS navigation app that boaters use, and shared it with friends and with CBS News. That map appears to show the dinghy route from the point where Lynette allegedly went overboard to Marsh Harbor, 4 miles to the west.
Now, this could be transparency. A man with nothing to hide showing exactly where he went. Or it could be something forensic investigators are specifically trained to look for, which is an attempt to establish a documented version of events before the actual data from the boat's systems tells a different story.
Maps that humans draw are one thing. GPS logs recorded by machines are another. And those logs are now in federal hands.
And speaking of the dinghy route, local search and rescue experts have analyzed the wind and tidal conditions on the night of April 4th. The analysis suggests that the current and wind patterns do not support the scenario Brian described. The trajectory he claims to have drifted and paddled does not align well with what the ocean was actually doing that night.
The math, the physics of water movement raises questions about whether someone in a small dinghy with a dead motor could have ended up where Brian says he did, in the time frame he says it took. That is not a conclusion. It is a question. But it is a question being asked by people with expertise in maritime search and rescue. And it is a question that deserves an answer.
There is another detail that has been raised by Karli and by several analysts covering this case that we want to address. because it goes to the character of the man at the center of this story. Brian Hooker is a former Marine. That is not just a line on a resume. Marines undergo extensive survival training. Water survival training. They are taught to stay calm in crisis situations, to assess and act, to put others before themselves.
Brian also described himself and Lynette as experienced boaters who had been sailing for years, who frequently traveled by dinghy, and who often did so without life vests. So the question that Karli asked, and that a lot of people have asked, is this. If your wife of 25 years goes overboard at night in choppy water, and you are a former Marine, and you are an experienced sailor, why do you not go in after her? Why do you not drop anchor immediately and dive into the water? Why do you yell for an hour and then paddle away?
Brian has not answered that question directly. His attorneys have said he is devastated and that he did everything he could. But the gap between what a trained former Marine could do and what Brian says he did that night is a gap that a lot of people cannot reconcile.
Now, let us bring this forward to where we are right now, because the investigation is not winding down, it is escalating.
The Coast Guard Investigative Service has Soulmate. They are processing it at Fort Pierce. They have the electronics, the navigation systems, the FLIR, the Ray Marine units, the radar, the solar controllers, the communications equipment, and whatever personal devices were still on board when they seized it. They also have the devices that were previously seized by Bahamian police under their search warrant.
Between those two sets of evidence, investigators now have access to virtually every piece of digital information that existed on or around that boat. And modern boats like Soulmate generate an enormous amount of data. If the boat moved the night of April 4th, there will be logs. If the autopilot engaged, there will be coordinates. If the tracking system was manually shut down and restarted, there will be a timestamp for when it went off and when it came back on. If the FLIR camera was activated, there will be a record. If any phone on board sent a text, made a call, or connected to a cell tower, there will be a record.
This is not speculation. This is how modern marine forensics work. These systems are designed to log everything. And a man who spent years networking his boat, adding technology, connecting systems. A man whose wife literally posted about him geeking out over the electronics. That man knew exactly what those systems could record.
Which means one of two things. Either he did not think about it in the chaos of the moment, which would be understandable if this were truly an accident. Or he knew and he tried to account for it, and that is what the 11-hour blackout was about.
Investigators will determine which one it is. The data will tell them. And that is why the seizure of Soulmate may be the single most important development in this case so far.
We want to take a moment here and explain what is likely happening at Fort Pierce right now, because it helps to understand the scope of what federal forensics can do with a vessel like this.
When CGIS processes a boat as evidence in a criminal investigation, they do not just plug in a laptop and download some files. This is a comprehensive, multidisciplinary forensic examination. Marine forensic specialists will go through the vessel inch by inch. They will use luminol, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin, to check for traces of blood that may have been cleaned up. Even if a surface has been scrubbed, bleached, and wiped down, luminol can still detect blood residue at concentrations invisible to the naked eye. It glows blue under ultraviolet light.
And on a boat with fiberglass surfaces, wood trim, and fabric upholstery, cleaning blood completely is extraordinarily difficult.
Digital forensic specialists will extract data from every electronic system on board. Ray Marine navigation units store waypoints, routes, speed, heading, and position data, often with timestamps going back months or even years. The FLIR system logs when it was activated, what mode it was in, and in some configurations can store recorded footage. The autopilot system records every input, every course correction, every time it was engaged or disengaged. The solar charge controllers log power consumption patterns, which can indicate when specific systems were drawing current and when they were not.
Cell phone forensics, which Bahamian authorities began when they seized devices under their warrant, can reveal text messages, call logs, GPS, location history, app usage data, internet searches, and even deleted content. Modern smartphones are almost impossible to truly wipe clean. Data recovery specialists can pull information from devices that the average person would assume had been erased.
And then there's the boat itself as a physical crime scene. Fiber analysis, DNA collection, fingerprinting of surfaces that may have been touched, examination of the dinghy for impact marks or biological material, inspection of the kill switch mechanism to determine if it functions the way Brian described, and analysis of the anchor system to see if it was used in a manner consistent with his account.
All of this takes time, weeks, potentially months. Federal forensic labs do not rush. They are thorough, methodical, and meticulous because whatever they find may end up as evidence in a courtroom. And prosecutors will not bring charges until they are confident that the forensic case is airtight.
So when people ask, why has nothing happened yet? That is why. It is not because the investigation has stalled. It is because the investigation is being done right.
While investigators process the boat, the search for the mystery sailboat continues. CGIS is still actively looking for the owner or occupants of a vessel that was moored near Soulmate at unpack Bay on the night of April 4th. They have released images of the boat. They are asking anyone who recognizes it to come forward. Tips can be submitted anonymously through the CGIS Tips app, available on both iPhone and Android.
And CBS News has reported that CGIS investigators have been conducting in-person interviews in recent days, not just reviewing files. Active, face-to-face interviews with potential witnesses. This investigation has resources, it has momentum, and it has federal authority behind it.
Let us talk about Karli Aylesworth for a moment because she deserves to be recognized for what she has done in the 6 weeks since her mother disappeared.
Karli is 28 years old. She is Lynette's daughter from a previous relationship. And from the moment she learned her mother was missing, she has been a force. She flew to the Bahamas, she hired attorneys. She launched a GoFundMe to support the search. She has given interviews to CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC. She was interviewed by CGIS investigators for 2 hours. She has posted on social media relentlessly, keeping her mother's name in the public eye, asking questions that nobody in Brian's camp has answered.
On Mother's Day, she posted a video that broke a lot of hearts. She said it was her first Mother's Day without her mom. She said it was hard knowing her mother was not a text away anymore. And in that same video, she sounded the alarm about Soulmate being moved by strangers. A warning that turned out to be exactly right.
Karli has called for a full and complete investigation. She has publicly questioned her stepfather's account. She has shared details about the family dynamics that paint a very different picture from the sailing paradise shown on social media. And she has not backed down, not once, not for a single day.
What strikes us about Karli is that she is doing what so many family members of missing people have to do, which is become her own advocate. She cannot rely on the media to keep covering this story. She cannot rely on social media algorithms to keep pushing her mother's name into people's feeds. She has to fight for attention, for resources, for answers every single day, and she is doing it while grieving. While not knowing if her mother is alive or dead. While watching the man she believes is responsible walk free.
That takes a kind of strength that most people never have to find out if they have. And Karli has it.
We also want to point out something that does not get talked about enough in cases like this. Lynette Hooker's case has received significant media attention. It has been covered by every major network. It has trended on social media. But that is not the norm. There are thousands of missing persons cases in this country and around the world that never get a single headline.
There are families just like Karli and just like Lynette's mother, Darlene, who are fighting for attention and getting none. And one of the reasons cases like this one matter, beyond the individual tragedy, is that they remind us how easy it is for someone to simply disappear. How the ocean can swallow a secret. How isolation, whether on a boat or in a remote home or in an abusive relationship that nobody else sees, can make a person invisible long before they actually go missing.
If this case does anything beyond finding justice for Lynette, we hope it makes people pay closer attention to the people they love, to the signs that something is wrong, to the difference between what someone posts online and what they are actually living through.
Her mother would be proud of her. We think most people watching this would agree with that.
Now we want to address the question of what happens next. Because this case is at a critical juncture. The boat is in federal hands. The forensic examination is underway. CGIS is conducting active interviews. The mystery sailboat is still being sought. And Brian Hooker is in Michigan, represented by 2 attorneys maintaining his innocence.
There are really only a few ways this can go from here. If the forensic evidence from Soulmate supports Brian's account, if the navigation data shows the boat did not move, if the FLIR was not activated, if the satellite tracking outage has an innocent explanation, if there is no biological evidence of violence, then his story gains credibility, and investigators may reach a dead end. That is possible, and it needs to be said.
But if the evidence contradicts his account, if the data tells a different story than the one he shared on camera and on that phone call, then we are looking at a potential arrest and prosecution. And given the resources being deployed, given the interdiction at sea, given the active federal criminal investigation, it is clear that CGIS believes they are building towards something. You do not seize a vessel in a complex surveillance operation, process it at a federal facility, and interview witnesses across multiple countries because you think everything is fine.
The next few weeks and months are going to be decisive, and we will be here for every development.
Now, we want to address something that comes up in almost every true crime case, and it is important to say it clearly. As of the date this episode was recorded, Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorneys in both the Bahamas and Michigan maintain that he is innocent. He has cooperated with Bahamian authorities to the extent that his legal counsel advised. He provided a voluntary statement, he sat for interviews. And he has said publicly multiple times that his wife's disappearance was a tragic accident caused by wind and current.
The legal principle of presumption of innocence exists for a reason. It protects all of us. And whatever we think, whatever you think, whatever the court of public opinion has decided, the facts of this case will ultimately be determined by evidence, not by speculation.
That said, the evidence is mounting, and it is pointing in a direction that makes Brian's account increasingly difficult to reconcile with reality.
A hard-hulled dinghy that does not bounce. An infrared camera system that can see in total darkness on a boat whose operator says he could not see his wife because there was no moon. An 11-hour satellite blackout on a vessel with a solar power system so robust that accidental power loss is nearly impossible. An 8-hour delay before contacting anyone.
A voicemail to his stepdaughter instead of a phone call. A promise on national television to keep searching, followed by a flight out of the country hours later. A retirement fund belonging to his wife worth over $500,000, his own savings depleted, a history of domestic incidents. A plane ticket his wife had booked to leave him that she never used. And now, a boat being moved by unknown individuals with the GPS disabled, seized by federal agents in a complex interdiction operation at sea.
Each of these details, taken alone, might have an innocent explanation. But taken together, they form a pattern. and patterns are what investigators look for.
Let us also mention the search and rescue efforts because the people who participated in them deserve acknowledgement. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Bahamian Police, and the United States Coast Guard all participated in the initial search for Lynette. They covered a significant area of water around Elbow Cay, Unpack Bay, and Marsh Harbor. They reviewed tide patterns, drift models, and wind data. Eventually, authorities said they had exhausted all areas to search.
The operation shifted from rescue to recovery. That is a term that means they are no longer looking for a living person. They are looking for remains. As of today, Lynette Hooker has not been found. Her body has not been recovered, and her family is living in a limbo that no family should ever have to endure.
Lynette's mother, Darlene Hamlet, told ABC News that she hopes the truth comes out. She described the couple's relationship as volatile. She said she wants closure, whatever form that takes.
And that is really what this comes down to, is it not? The truth. A woman is missing. Her family wants to know what happened. The public wants to know what happened. And somewhere in the data stored on that boat, in the memories of whoever was on that mystery sailboat, in the forensic evidence being processed right now at Fort Pierce, the truth exists.
It is not a matter of if it will come out. It is a matter of when.
Let us take one more pass through the key questions that remain unanswered, because it is important to be specific about what we do not know.
Who were the two men who moved Soulmate from Marsh Harbor? Who sent them? Why was the GPS disabled? Was Brian Hooker aware the boat was being moved?
If the satellite tracking on Soulmate was manually deactivated the night of April 4th, who did it and why? What does the FLIR system's log show for that night? Was the camera activated? Was it deliberately powered down?
What do the Raymarine autopilot logs show? Did the boat's navigation systems record any movement after 7:30 in the evening on April 4th? What is on? The electronic devices that were seized by Bahamian police. What communications, if any, were made from the boat that night?
What does the navionics data on Brian's phone actually show compared to the screenshot he voluntarily shared? Who owns the mystery sailboat at Unpack Bay? And what did they see or hear?
What are the financial arrangements between Brian and Lynette? Who is the beneficiary of her retirement accounts, her life insurance, if she had any? And what happens to Soulmate now that it is in federal custody?
Those are not rhetorical questions. Those are active lines of inquiry, and investigators are pursuing every single one of them.
We want to end this the way we always try to end these cases, by sitting with the person at the center of it for a moment. Because Lynette Hooker is not a headline. She is not a mystery to be solved over coffee. She is not a trending topic or a hashtag or a case file number. She's a mother, a daughter, a grandmother to some, a friend to many. A woman who looked at the ocean and said, "This is where I belong."
She documented every piece of her life on the water, the good days and the hard days, the sea turtles and the storms. She was brave enough to sell everything and chase a dream most people only talk about. She was brave enough to leave when things got bad. And she was human enough to go back, because that is what people do. They hope things will change. They believe in the person they fell in love with. They look at the sunset from the bow of a sailboat and think, maybe this time it will be different.
Her last Instagram caption was, "Not going anywhere for a while." She should still be there, on that boat, in that water she loved, watching the sun go down over the Bahamas with salt on her skin and the wind in her hair.
Instead, she is missing. And every day that passes without answers is another day her daughter wakes up without her mother. Another day her own mother prays for news that might never come. Another day the ocean keeps whatever secret it was asked to hold on the night of April 4th, 2026.
There is a cruelty in not knowing, in being suspended between hope and grief. In checking your phone every morning, wondering if today is the day someone calls with news? Karli lives in that space every single day. Darlene lives in that space. Lynette's friends, her extended family, the people who followed her sailing adventures and rooted for her from afar, they all live in that space now. And the only thing that can bring them out of it is the truth.
Lynette deserves to be found. She deserves answers. She deserves justice. And her family deserves to know what happened to the woman they loved.
And we believe, based on everything we know about this investigation, based on the resources being deployed, based on the technology on that boat and the federal agents processing it right now, that the truth is coming. It may not come tomorrow. It may not come next week. But Soulmate knows what happened that night. And you cannot outrun the data stored inside the boat you built your entire life around.
If you have any information about this case, if you were in the Bahamas in the Elbow Key, Hopetown, and Pat's Bay, or Marsh Harbor area on the night of April 4th, 2026, if you know anything about the mystery sailboat, if you have even the smallest detail that you think might not matter, please come forward. Download the CGIS Tips app on your iPhone or Android. Tips can be submitted anonymously. Let the investigators decide what matters. Because Lynette Hooker matters.
And if you are watching this and you know someone who was in the Bahamas around that time, share this video with them. Share it everywhere. The more people who see this, the more likely we are to find that one person who saw something, heard something, or knows something that cracks this case wide open.
If you made it this far, thank you. We mean that. Cases like this stay in the public eye because people like you choose to pay attention. Because you refuse to let a woman's disappearance become just another unsolved file in a drawer somewhere. Because you understand that watching a video, sharing it, talking about it, keeping someone's name alive in the public conversation, that is not just passive consumption. That is advocacy. That is pressure. That is the kind of sustained public attention that keeps investigators accountable and keeps cases from going cold.
Lynette's family is watching, Karli is watching, and they see every comment, every share, every person who says, I'm not going to forget her. That matters more than you know. When you are a family member of a missing person, the loneliest feeling in the world is thinking that nobody cares. That the world has moved on. That your mother, your daughter, your sister has been reduced to a statistic. Every time someone watches this video, comments on it, shares it with a friend, you are telling that family, we see you and we are not moving on.
If you want more cases like this, hit the like button. It helps the algorithm push this to more people who need to see it. It costs you nothing, and it changes everything for reach. Subscribe if you have not already, because this case is moving, and we will be back the moment there is a new development. And we know there will be, because CGIS is not slowing down. The forensics on that boat are just beginning, and somewhere out there, the owner of that mystery sailboat has a story to tell.
Turn on notifications. We know that sounds like every creator begging for engagement, but in cases like this, timing matters. When something breaks, we want you to know about it immediately. Not 3 days later when the algorithm decides to show it to you. Right away.
Drop your theories in the comments. Tell us what you think happened. Tell us what detail stands out to you. Tell us what question you want answered most. We read every single comment on these videos, and some of the best insights we have encountered in cases like this have come from viewers who noticed something that everyone else overlooked. This community, right here, the people watching this right now, is part of what keeps pressure on cases like this. Your attention is not passive, it is powerful. It is a spotlight. And when enough spotlights point at the same place, there is nowhere left to hide.
Lynette, we have not forgotten you. Your daughter has not stopped fighting. Your mother has not stopped praying. And the people watching this, thousands and thousands of them, they have not stopped asking questions. We are watching. We are paying attention. We are demanding answers. And we are not going anywhere until the truth comes out. Not anywhere. Not for a while. Not ever.
Take care of each other out there. Hug the people you love. Tell them you love them. Pay attention to the people in your life who might be going through something they are not showing you on social media. Because sometimes the biggest cries for help are the ones you never hear.
And remember, the truth does not just matter. It is everything.